Today we're going to do something a little different. I've got our very own Director of Scientific Affairs, Dr. Stephanie Girard here, and we're going to read a series of statements related to GLP-1 inspired product development and clinical trial design. We've got some flags here, a green flag, a red flag, and even an it depends flag, because we want to see how Dr. Girard will evaluate statements related to clinical trial design, participant recruitment, and even reporting and publishing aspects. So, without further ado, let's get into it. Including overweight or obese participants when weight outcomes are primary.
It's my favorite flag. It depends how risk aversive the company is. It's less risk, only including overweight. However, to see an effect on weight loss, easier if you include obese. You can cautiously perhaps include class 1 obesity, so up to a BMI of 34.9. That's kind of a gray area, and it also depends on the claims themselves. So it's a bunch of depends, but both could be done.
Choosing a 6-week trial and expecting to capture meaningful weight loss outcomes.
I would go with this. Acceptability in terms of regulators, you would need a longer trial. You may capture some changes already after 6 weeks, but is that due to water loss or fat mass? So that's another thing to consider. So how are you going to measure that weight loss? Are you going to do DEXA scans? So you may just have the water loss at first, which wouldn't be meaningful for a weight management trial. So I would say longer than 6 weeks.
Registering your trial on clinicaltrials.gov, even if it's a supplement.
Yes, especially if it's a supplement. Now, I really recommend doing so, registering clinicaltrials.gov or any other clinical trial registries. It has to do with publishing your data afterwards. A lot of the scientific journals will not publish your manuscript, even though it's well designed, well executed, excellent results, very rigorous, everything put into it was really correct. But if it wasn't registered on one of these trial registries, then they won't accept the manuscript. So I definitely recommend. It does tell the world out there what type of trial you are conducting, and maybe competitors or others in the same industry can see what you're studying, but at the same time you don't have to publish the results. At least you have to publish that you're conducting a trial. So definitely I recommend 100%.
Using BMI as the sole primary endpoint without secondary measures like waist circumference or body fat. Yeah,
I have a problem with BMI. You can get elite athletes, football players or, that have a high muscular mass, and according to their height and their weight, they can be considered obese, yet these are athletes and they're very healthy. BMI is kind of flawed in my opinion, so I would definitely recommend other measurements as well. Waist circumference is a good one. So not solely on BMI. And again, if you're looking at weight loss, I would definitely consider some DEXA scans as well to see where the weight is coming from that you're losing, right? Is it water, muscle, or fat? So definitely, not just the BMI.
Using an adapted protocol from pharma GLP-1 trials without necessarily tailoring it for nutraceutical context.
Yeah, I would say it depends. I need to see that protocol. I really need to have a look at it. Pharma are very rigorous and they look at small shifts and small changes because it's very targeted. Drugs have, they're agonists or antagonists of a receptor, or they're very, very specific targeted molecules. So maybe less relevant to a dietary supplement where it's a more holistic approach. So depending on the indication, the outcome, the protocol, I'd say it depends. I'd have to have a look. You can send it to me.
Recruiting motivated participants can improve compliance if inclusion and exclusion is clear.
I would say yes. But you have to be careful, because then if you're recruiting participants that are very eager to please, you could increase your placebo effect as well. So something to consider. But if the inclusion-exclusion criteria are clear, the participants are motivated, that's kind of a good combo. But just be wary of the fact that eager participants will likely have a higher placebo effect than your placebo group. So just keep in mind. So I'd say yes.
Using a crossover design to reduce variability with proper washout.
Yes. With proper washout, it is true that you're reducing variability. Each participant is his or her own control. So yes. However, it's not always the right move or the right design to choose, depending on the outcome, the indication. So crossovers, yes, you can reduce the variability, inter-individual variability, but not always the best design. So yes, and it depends. There.
Using a population with a low metabolic risk to detect meaningful change.
It is possible. It is possible, but it would have to be more defined in what indication. But it is possible when you're in the at-risk bracket. So you could see an impact of your supplement, or dietary supplement, natural health product, but you would be, it would be difficult. It depends on what you look. So I guess it depends. But it's possible, but not impossible. So.
Relying only on fasting glucose.
Ooh, that's a good question too. It's gonna depend, because maybe that's what you want to modulate, because I know there are trials out there where they just look at fasting. If you want to see you want to have a quick idea of what your dietary supplement or natural health product does, maybe you just want to look at fasting levels. So not necessarily post-meal or meal-induced or the response after the meal. Maybe you just want to see, yes, at the fasting levels. So it is possible, and you could have an impact of your supplement depending on what it is. So I say, yeah.
Using healthy participants if your goal is mechanistic evidence.
Yes. I mean, most of our dietary supplement studies, natural health products, do require healthy participants. Mechanistic, yeah. You would just have to show both in one trial. That would be the ideal. So get some biomarkers involved, so to look at the more mechanistic aspect, and do some outcomes, efficacy outcomes that are more applicable to the general population, that they would appreciate more, digestive comfort, decreased discomfort, rather than looking only at biomarkers, which for marketability is a bit less interesting. But I would say, yeah, mechanistic studies in healthy participants. Yeah.
Using appetite or satiety scales like VAS or SLIM.
As a primary outcome? So I say yes. I'd say yes. Some trials are looking at those types of visual analog scales, VAS, for appetite. So they're self-reported, they're subjective. However, that's what people, relate to. Are they feeling better, yes or no? So you may be measuring biomarkers and they may be going in one direction, but, really, do they really feel an impact? How do they feel? So subjectivity of the participant is really important. So I would say yes for visual analog scales. It's a validated scale, and if you're looking at things like appetite, definitely you could use them.
Choosing endpoints that may be outside your desired claim. For example, satiety measures, but planning a weight claim.
Yeah, I always say bigger bang for your buck. Try to include more outcomes as secondary or exploratory outcomes. It may give you a better idea of the big picture, how your supplement is acting, or what else it could be doing that you may not have anticipated. However, you will not be powered necessarily to look at these things, so you have to be really careful how you interpret and disseminate those results. But definitely having more outcomes looking at different things within the same indication, or I would recommend doing it. Not too many, because what can also happen is that they can contradict each other, so you don't want that. So it's really a calculated decision, but if it's going to give you more information on your dietary supplement, I recommend putting them as secondary or exploratory. So, yeah.
Using trend towards significance language as a basis for claims.
No, not for claims. I think for claims, well, again, maybe it depends. Depending on how risk aversive the company is. Oh, I would need another webinar on statistical significance and clinical relevance and, trends and what the p-value really means. Depending on your design, depending on how powered you are, depending on what you're looking at. Something trending could be really, really important and a good segue into a future trial. So I would say don't dismiss trends. I mean, that's what pilot studies are all for, is to see the trends and then power your trial to really see the significant difference with the placebo arm. But definitely, trends are really important, scientifically sounded. You can talk about those also in your manuscript, your publications, but in terms of claims, with trending p-value, I would avoid. But again, it depends on the risk aversion of your company, but I would tend to say, avoid.